Welcome back to the Old Photo Vault channel. The Faint Visitor, an old American parlor, circa 1920. On a mild afternoon in Aunt Carol's old parlor, where the curtains trembled without a breeze, a young woman named Margaret posed for a simple photograph, unaware that a pale, elongated figure was drifting out from the doorway behind her. Neighbors later insisted the house had belonged to a quiet man named Elias Ward, who vanished in 1891 and was said to wander the halls searching for someone who never returned. In the photo, his shape seems to lean toward Margaret, as though recognizing her. She swore afterward she had felt a cool breath against her neck, a presence waiting for her to turn. The family dismissed her story, but the photograph remained. And each year, the figure appears a little closer. The Last Vigil, a small funeral parlor in Louisiana, 1952. They said the photograph was meant only to capture Reverend Samuel Price on the night his family kept vigil. Yet when the film was developed, a faint face hovered behind the black curtains, thin, watchful, almost pleading. The widow, Clara Price, insisted it resembled Jonah Reed, a parishioner who died decades earlier after swearing he would return for the Reverend over an old secret neither man had ever spoken aloud. Neighbors remembered hearing soft knocks on the parlor door that night, though no one stood outside. In the picture, Clara's eyes seem fixed slightly off frame, as if she already sensed the visitor before the camera did. The funeral home denied any tricks of light, and when the family returned for the body the next morning, the curtains were found gently swaying, though not a window had been opened. The Pale Watcher, an apartment in Chicago, 1976. They said the photograph was just a candid shot of Lila Warren, exhausted after her night shift, drifting somewhere between boredom and sleep on her avocado green sofa. But when the film was developed, a soft, featureless face appeared behind the sliding door. Too tall, too smooth, as if pressed close to the glass and listening. Lila had complained for weeks that someone kept opening the hallway light at odd hours, though her neighbors insisted no one lived across from her anymore. The landlord mentioned, quietly, that a tenant named Henry Doss had died there the previous winter, found standing upright against his own balcony door, frozen in a posture of waiting. In the photo, Lila's hand lifts the cigarette as if she heard something just before the flash, and the shape behind the door seems to lean in, almost relieved to be seen at last. The window face, a tenement room in New York City, 1911. The photograph was taken by a charity worker documenting tenement conditions, a routine record of peeling walls, a sagging cot, and a stove that never quite warmed the room. Only after development did they notice the enormous face pressed against the grimy window, expressionless, too proportioned to be a trick of light, and far too close to the glass for anyone to have stood safely on the ledge outside. The family who lived there, the O'Haras, insisted that their youngest son, Liam, had been whispering for months about the man who watches through the cloth, pointing at the lace curtain as if someone answered him there. Neighbors recalled hearing tapping on the panes at night, rhythmic and patient. In the photo, the tilted mirror reflects nothing at all, though it should have caught the face directly, and the charity worker later admitted she had felt, while standing in that narrow room, as though someone tall was breathing steadily just behind her. The Extra Smile, a school corridor in Jakarta, 2009. The photo was meant to be nothing more than a noisy group shot. End-of-term laughter, too many hands in the frame, everyone jostling for space. But when the class checked the picture on the phone, someone noticed a face wedged between two students at the bottom corner, blurred, gray, and smiling far too widely, as if delighted to be included. None of the children recognized it, and no one had been standing there. One girl, Ronnie, later whispered that she'd felt fingers brush her shoulder during the shot, though everyone in the group insisted their hands were visible. Teachers dismissed it as compression or shadow. Yet the more the image was passed around, the clearer the strange face seemed to become, leaning forward as though it knew every one of their names. The Wall Sleeper, a basement in Ohio, 1984. The landlord had taken the photograph only to show how livable the basement was. Just concrete walls, a lone mattress, and a single bulb humming overhead. But when the picture came back, a face seemed to rise from the damp stain on the far wall. Long, hollow, almost peaceful, as though half asleep and listening. Tenants before had complained about soft breathing at night, a steady exhale they blamed on old pipes, though the building's plumbing didn't run through the basement at all. One renter, Mark Ellison, swore he woke once to find the mattress gently dipping beside him, as if someone had just stood up. The landlord dismissed him. But the next morning, faint footprints trailed toward the wall and stopped there. In the photograph, the face appears to tilt ever so slightly toward the mattress, as if waiting for someone to lie back down. The Uninvited Guest, a village home in Poland, 1963. The photograph was taken moments after the small village wedding feast began. Modest bottles of champagne, a lace veil slightly askew. The groom trying to sit still for just one decent picture. But when the film was developed, a pale man appeared standing behind the bride, his expression blank, his outline too solid to be smoke, yet too faded to be flesh. Neither family recognized him, though the bride's aunt quietly said he resembled a neighbor named Tomasz Kowalik, who had died 3 years earlier after insisting he wouldn't miss her wedding for the world. The couple remembered no one entering the room. Yet the bride recalled a sudden draft lifting her veil, as though someone brushed past her chair. In the picture, the groom's eyes seemed fixed slightly away from the lens, as if following a movement only he saw, and the bottles on the table show a faint ripple, as though someone had just leaned close to take a seat. The Cradle Grave, a rural cemetery in Arkansas. 1927, the photograph was taken by a visiting historian who'd heard rumors of an old grave marked not by stone alone, but by the remains of a child's wooden crib. The name on the marker belonged to Nellie Lamb, born and died in the same week of 1882. Laid to rest in the crib she never slept in. Locals said her mother returned for years, leaving the crib in place so Nellie wouldn't be alone, though no one ever saw her arrive. In the picture, a faint, pale shape curls near the broken slats, almost like a small figure trying to sit upright. The ground around the grave looks recently disturbed, though the cemetery had been abandoned for decades. And the historian later admitted that, as he bent to take the photo, he distinctly heard the soft creak of wood rocking, slow, steady, and meant for a child. The Mirror Veil, a boarding house in Massachusetts, 1904. The photograph was taken by a roommate who wanted to capture young Eleanor Gray brushing her hair before supper, her long, dark waves nearly touching the floor. Only after the print dried did they notice the faint face in the embroidered towel beside her. Pale, watchful, its features clearer than any pattern in the fabric should allow. Eleanor had complained for weeks that her reflection seemed a half-second slow, as if the mirror waited before returning her gaze. Other girls in the house whispered that a former tenant, Clara Bell, had died in that very room after insisting she saw someone standing just behind her in the glass. In the photo, Eleanor's reflection looks quieter than she does, almost braced. And the towel, though untouched, seems to lean toward her like a curtain being drawn aside. The Hallway Lurker, an abandoned sanitarium in Pennsylvania, 1998. The photograph was taken by 2 urban explorers who swore the building was silent except for their own footsteps and the soft crumble of plaster under their boots. They didn't see anything when the flash went off. Just rows of empty pillars and a long corridor vanishing into darkness. But later, on the small camera screen, a face peeks from behind a column. Half-lit, hair hanging forward, its expression strangely eager, as though it had waited for someone to look its way. Locals whispered that a patient named Daniel Crow once hid in those same halls, refusing to leave long after the sanitarium closed, certain they'd come back for him. In the photo, the figure leans too far out to be balancing on its feet, its body at an angle no person should hold. And the explorers admitted that, right after taking the shot, they heard something skitter across the debris, quick, close, and following them to the exit. The Dinner Guests, a suburban home in Georgia, 1974. The photograph was meant to be a joke. White sheets draped over chairs, the dining table staged for a ghostly banquet before the family redecorated the room. But when the film was developed, a tall, hooded figure appeared beside the china cabinet, its face dim and long, as though carved from shadow. No one in the house had been standing there. The room had been empty, except for the person taking the picture. One of the children later said he remembered hearing someone shuffle behind him. Slow steps that stopped the moment he turned. In the photo, the chandelier's crystals tilt slightly, as if brushed by a passing body, and the figure's head seems angled toward the chairs, like it had been invited and arrived early. The Bathing Blur, a farmhouse in Vermont, 1898. The photograph was meant to capture baby Thomas splashing in the tin wash basin, sunlight warming the small upstairs room where his mother had opened the curtains just a moment before. Yet when the plate was developed, Thomas's figure appears doubled. One shape sitting, the other rising beside it, as though a second child were trying to stand in the same narrow space. His mother had often complained that Thomas seemed to stare past her shoulder while bathing, smiling at someone she could never see. A previous tenant had lost an infant in that room decades earlier, a boy named Eli, who died before his first winter. In the photo, the robe on the peg billows slightly, though the door was shut tight. And the blurred figure beside Thomas leans toward the light, as if eager not to be left behind again. The Watching Child, a suburban living room in California, 2006. The picture was supposed to be nothing more than a tender moment. A father lifting his baby, both of them caught in that soft afternoon light, spilling from the dining room. Only later did the family notice the small figure seated at the far table, a child-sized shape staring directly toward the camera, though no other children were in the house that day. The mother said she remembered hearing a chair scrape behind her just before the photo was taken, but she blamed it on the dog. Neighbors whispered about a little girl who'd lived there before, a quiet one who vanished one summer and was never mentioned again. In the image, the baby seems to look past his father's shoulder, not at him, but toward the dining room. And the figure in the circle sits very still, hands folded, as though waiting for someone to notice she hadn't left. The Porch Visitor, a mountain cabin in Tennessee, 1941. The photograph was taken to mark a quiet afternoon. Just Ruth and Samuel Fowler sitting on their porch with their old hound, the winter sun slanting low across the boards. Nothing seemed unusual until the print showed a tall, pale shape rising behind them, its head bent slightly as if listening in on their conversation. Ruth had mentioned before that she often heard footsteps on the porch at night, slow ones that stopped just outside the door. Samuel blamed it on deer, though the dog would sit up and stare at the empty corner with its ears pinned back. In the picture, the shadow of the figure doesn't match the angle of the afternoon light at all, and Ruth later said she felt a cold breath on the back of her neck moments after the shutter clicked, as though someone had leaned close to whisper something she wasn't meant to hear. The Stairwell Face, an abandoned house in Missouri, 1979. The photograph was taken by a pair of surveyors documenting a condemned rental property, the kind of place where the air felt heavy even before the flash went off. Nothing showed in the moment, just a rotting stairwell vanishing into darkness, the boards soft with age. But on the developed print, a pale face seems to rise from the peeling wall, its eyes unfocused yet fixed on whoever stands at the bottom step. Neighbors said a tenant named Harriet Collins once disappeared there, last seen walking toward the basement with a candle that was found still burning hours later. People who entered afterwards swore they heard whispering on the stairs, as if someone were trying to climb up but never quite reached the top. In the photo, the shadows cling strangely tight to the steps, as though something on them didn't want to be seen fully. The Pale Companion, a portrait studio in Boston. 1891. The photograph was meant to be a simple portrait of Clara Winslow, taken just after her 17th birthday. A soft backdrop, borrowed gown, her long braid arranged neatly over one shoulder. But when the plate was developed, a tall, hollow-eyed figure appeared behind her, its mouth open in a silent wail, as though it had risen out of the fogged background itself. Clara had complained for weeks that she felt someone breathing close whenever she stood still too long. A coldness that vanished the moment she turned her head. The studio owner swore no one else had been present. Yet his assistant quit the next day, insisting he'd seen a shape kneeling behind the girl in the dim red light. In the photo, Clara's braid hangs unnaturally straight, as if something has just let go of it, and the cracked emulsion frames the spirit perfectly, like it had been waiting for someone to finally capture its face. The Double Portrait, a photography parlor in Washington, D.C., 1879. The photograph was meant to be a formal likeness of Mrs. Eleanor Pratt, taken at a quiet parlor on F Street where sitters were reminded to remain perfectly still. She held her pose, hands folded, eyes fixed ahead. Yet when the print was finished, a second figure hovered above her, blurred but unmistakably feminine, leaning close as if to murmur something into her ear. Eleanor had recently lost a sister, Margaret, whose passing she refused to speak about, except to say she felt her presence just behind the shoulder. The photographer insisted no double exposure was made. The plate was fresh, the chemicals new. In the picture, Eleanor's expression seems half-braced, as though she heard someone approach the moment before the shutter snapped, and the faint figure's hands appear poised at her shoulders, like they had never stopped resting there. The Mirror Patron, a barbershop in Chicago. 1913. The photograph was taken to showcase the shop's new electric lights. Bright, modern, reflecting neatly off the glass bottles lined up along the counter. The barbers stand casually beside their chairs, mid-conversation, while a customer waits with his coat still on. Only later did someone notice the tall, pale face in the mirror behind them, too large and too close to belong to anyone in the room. Its features seemed pressed forward, as if leaning through the glass rather than reflected in it. Old employees used to swear a former patron, Henry Lasker, died right in that chair during a shave decades earlier, insisting with his last breath that he would return for one more look. In the picture, none of the mirrors show the same scene twice, and the face looks fixed on the empty chair, as though waiting for Henry's appointment to finally begin. The Window Watcher, an abandoned mill in Michigan, 2011. The photograph was taken during a late-night exploration, the kind where you shine a flashlight into empty rooms just to prove to yourself nothing's there. The group insisted the second floor was silent, glass crunching underfoot, peeling paint, the soft groan of settling beams. But in the picture, a man stands in one of the broken windows, half lit, hands resting calmly on the sill as though he'd been waiting. His outline is too sharp for a trick of shadow, yet no one saw him when the photo was taken. Locals once spoke of a mill worker named Jacob Rourke, who vanished after a machinery accident. His body never recovered. In the image, the figure's face seems strangely patient, almost relieved to be found, and the darkness behind him looks deeper than the rest of the building, like something opened just for him to step forward. The Clearing Whispers, a woodland campsite in Pennsylvania, 2003. They'd taken the picture mostly to calm their nerves. Just a quick flash at the tree line to prove nothing was there. Later, though, the photos showed those pale, curling shapes drifting across the clearing, almost like figures stepping through the air, almost like the camera had caught something mid-movement. No one agreed on what they were. One camper insisted it had to be smoke, though they hadn't lit a fire in hours. Another said it looked like the leftover glow from the flashlight beam. But everyone remembered that strange pause after the rustling stopped, as if the woods were holding its breath. And the longer they stared at the picture, the more the shapes seemed to lean toward the abandoned chair. Whether that meant something or nothing at all, none of them wanted to decide. And that brings us to the last unsettling moment for tonight. Some of these images may show nothing more than tricks of light. Or maybe they capture things we weren't meant to notice. Either way, the stories linger. If you've ever taken a picture and found something strange hiding in the background, share it in the comments. I'd love to see what you've caught. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more haunting stories, and ring the bell so you never miss a night in the dark with us. Thanks for watching, and keep your camera close. You never know what might be standing just outside the frame.